Hey, this is Scott at Fire Breathing Christian, and there's been some really cool news here lately. As you can see on the screen, I've got an article here. Ethan Van Sciver announces all caps comics. And this is very cool for a lot of reasons. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Comicsgate movement or Ethan Van Sciver's stuff, we've done some videos on that already. You can check it out. There's a whole lot more stuff, a lot more coverage all over the internet. And a lot of YouTube folks who are cranking out a lot of good material on the pro Comicsgate side of things. But Ethan Van Sciver in particular, he's the guy that for me, it sort of introduced me to this whole thing. And I just sort of stumbled onto one of his videos in a YouTube feed. And that has basically been largely to blame for what I'm doing here now. You know, his influence and seeing that what he's trying to do to save comic books from his perspective. He's a very talented and former DC and I think also Marvel artist. He's done a lot of work for decades, very experienced guy. Seems to have a good head on his shoulders and he's tired of the social justice warrior takeover of the industry. And he's decided over the last couple years to push back. And his pushback, wherever you're at on his particular work or perspective on anything, his pushback should be inspiring and encouraging to all of us who would like to use our own talents, treasures, whatever we've got to try and improve whatever it is in the culture that we love. Ethan loves comic books. I love comic books. We both love comic book movies. He's a big Star Wars fan. And so we share a lot of frustrations. And when I stumbled onto his video, the first video of his that I saw, it really moved me. And he's gone on since that first video that I bumped into was like maybe 4 or 5 months ago. Now he's since launched a very successful independently funded comic book campaign built around a character that he'd created a while back called Cyberfrog. Now, Cyberfrog, right now, whatever adventures that character has embarked upon in the past, right now, his primary mission, and he is doing it well, is to terrorize the SJW forces atop the giant comic book producing companies that have, up until recently, dominated the industry, Marvel and DC and others. But Cyberfrog, what's been cool there is Ethan decided to leave DC Comics, had a very good gig there, of course. He's very popular, does great work. And that's what it ultimately comes down to. He's a comic artist who's very, very good at what he does. He also happens to be a thoughtful, creative guy. And that part's fine from the perspective of most big corporate entities like DC and Marvel. But the friction comes when Ethan's lack of SJW support. Ethan, you see, has committed the crime, the unpardonable sin of supporting Donald Trump. And so that makes for incalculable problems from the perspective of the SJW types that are running Marvel and DC into the ground right now. And so Ethan left DC and went and relaunched Cyberfrog. And I think in the Cyberfrog campaign at Indiegogo, I'm going to go to that page now. You got to see this. He started out, it had an initial goal. Oh, I don't see it posted here as far as what the initial goal was, but it wildly exceeded the initial goal to the tune of bringing in $538,000, over $500,000 in funding from a Cyberfrog character comic book launched by Ethan Van Sciver, independent of Marvel, independent of DC. This you can't really overstate the significance of something like this. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and I'm one of them, and I don't have a lot of money. We've got 3 kids, 1 on the way. As a matter of fact, I'm recording this video while we're visiting family, and you may hear the kids loudly playing downstairs as I record this. My apologies in advance. Well, I'm not going to apologize much, but I just so you know, there's nothing really I can do about that in this setting. So Cyberfrog is launched on Indiegogo with, I think he had a 5-figure goal. I don't even remember what it was. I wish it was posted here, but he ends up making over $500,000, which sends shockwaves, of course, through the industry, because the profitability of most, or lack of profitability of most major comics now at Marvel and DC, as they've become, especially the ones that have gone the full-blown SJW route, they perform terribly, and they are frequently canceled. Of course, they're then relaunched with the same creative teams usually, because SJWs cannot be allowed to fail. That's a whole other issue. We've explored that recently. I think yesterday we had a video that we put up on the whole gay Iceman thing that Marvel keeps trying and trying and trying to somehow make work. They've tried it again as of this month. But anyway, then you have Cyberfrog coming along making over $500,000 and is so successful that Ethan later added a variant cover option. I think for a week or so he gave supporters who wanted to get in on the action but hadn't earlier the opportunity to support and benefit from a variant comic cover for the book, and that raised $90,000. So between the two, you have well over $600,000 has been raised by Cyberfrog. And from what I can tell, I mean, like I said, I'm getting the comic. I'm a supporter of both the variant cover and the initial launch there, and it looks very cool to me. It looks like it'll be a lot of fun. It looks like it'll be very well done. And this is the sort of thing, if you love comics, these are the sorts of things, and you want to see them saved. The social justice warrior domination of the industry is killing the industry, but it's only killing the industry at the top right now. Marvel and DC are suffering for their support of, or sort of surrender to, this weird, warped religion of cultural Marxism and identity politics. They're going down the drain, but that doesn't mean, one of the things we need to understand, and I think Ethan's effort here with Cyberfrog makes perfectly clear, is that just because DC or Marvel might go down the drain, they don't take comic books with them. Comic books aren't theirs. Heroes aren't theirs. Superheroes aren't theirs. Drama doesn't belong to them. These organizations, it's like sci-fi doesn't belong to Disney now that it owns Star Wars. Those companies can go down the drain and they can do a lot of damage to the iconic figures that they own or hold the rights to, but they don't own the comic book hero concept. And so what we're seeing here is there's a real appetite, a huge market, and people are willing to spend for actual superheroic classic comic books. That is very comforting and very inspiring. And I hope that Ethan's efforts with Cyberfrog will inspire you or anyone you know who's interested in that sort of art to get in the game. Do what you can. We've been blessed with technology and an ability to connect with supporters and to publish books and create things in ways, through the internet, social media, technologies like 3D printing. All of these tools that have been dropped into our laps now, normal people in what you could call the middle class, I'm not a big fan of that term, but y'all know what I mean. We've been blessed with incredible tools to bypass the centralized powers that used to be able to dictate what was allowed to influence the culture or make it to market or that sort of thing. It's just not the case anymore. And this is why Cyberfrog is such a threat and terror to the folks at DC who, and as we discussed earlier, this idea of the cultural Marxists, the Marxists in general, they have this idea, and this was planted a long time ago. We've discussed this in earlier videos. I'd encourage you to go check them out. They had this idea that if they spent time, if they committed themselves to spending the decades and potentially centuries, generations of time necessary to march through the institutions that control a culture, it's called the Great March, this cultural Marxist idea, the Great March through the institutions, so that over time, they would take over schools, churches, a lot of businesses, government, of course, take control of the centralized institutions, the institutions where power is centralized in specific areas, publishing, media, whatever. Take those over. Then, once their people got to the top and had control, they could direct those giant institutions to conduct themselves in a way that would steer whatever part of the culture that they are empowered over in a more Marxist direction. And so now what we're seeing is the cultural Marxists have made that march. They've taken over company after company, after government. All these institutions, schools have been long gone for a long time. They've taken those things, but now, thanks to the internet and the technologies that I've mentioned, now the power that used to come with those institutions is largely not there anymore, and it's fading by the minute. So they take over DC, they take over Marvel, they give you gay Iceman and black girl Iron Man, and now they are unable to force those through as the only available superhero comics for people to consume and to influence the culture. Now we have Cyberfrog and other efforts that are coming up. And we're going to cover a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of great stuff out there that's being produced independently, and it's doing very, very well. And the Cyberfrog, the bar now is so high with Cyberfrog. DC and Marvel, I mean, what are they going to do? This is a problem. This is a threat. And one of the things they've taken to doing now is they're in all-out PR warfare with the likes of Ethan Van Sciver, trying to tag anyone who supports the Comicsgate movement and any works that are associated with people that are involved with the Comicsgate movement, trying to make us all, of course, out to be evil, Nazi, white supremacists, whatever. It's just bad, bad, bad people. So folks in the comic book or Comicsgate movement now are getting accustomed to the treatment that really anyone who's opposed publicly a social justice warrior mindset. We all know that when you do that, you're just going to be called a Nazi, a white supremacist, an evil person, a racist, sexist, blankophobe, whatever it is. And that's all they've got. This points to the lack of creativity that's killing the industries they've been entrusted to, or entrusted with, insofar as companies like DC and Marvel have had control. But the beauty of this whole situation unfolding before us now is that the SJWs, by killing, effectively, Marvel and DC and dragging them down the drain, they've made possible the incredible, rapid rise and success of things like Cyberfrog and the other independent efforts that are just now going to get going. I think over the next year or two, you're going to see a huge wave of this sort of thing, and that is beautiful. We should be supportive. If comic books are your thing, if you're very frustrated, as I am, with the direction that has been taken with comic books by the major publishers, then we should be looking for things we can support or create ourselves. If you have a creative, if you have ability, use it. Get in the market. Connect with people. Use social media, crowdfunding. Do things like this. We have opportunities we've never had before, and I just want to take a moment to make people who might not be aware of Cyberfrog to point you in that direction and encourage support of things like this as the first early steps towards a brighter future for comic books, comic book movies, and the things that have been soiled and wrecked by the SJW mindset at Marvel and DC. If you appreciated this video and you want to support what we're doing, please like the video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit the little bell icon so that you can be notified every time we post a new video, which we're hoping to do regularly on a daily basis from here on out on this subject and related subjects. Thank you very much for your support. Without it, we can't continue to do this.